All right, welcome everybody. This is a live stream that we're doing here with Hans, and we've got Matt Smith with us as well. The Q4 earnings call is happening tomorrow. It's a big Super Bowl for all of us, and we want to just talk about what can you expect. Let's talk about the key questions that investors are asking that they're going to answer tomorrow, and we're going to look at the consensus for Q4 estimates and so forth. So, welcome Hans and Matt. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Herbert. Good to be here.
Excited for tomorrow.
Well, why are you excited? Let's start with that. What's so exciting about tomorrow?
Well, yeah, I think there's a number of things. Obviously, we've really seen energy deployments grow recently. And so that's one of the things that I really want to look for is what's the flow through on that to the bottom line. Hoping to hear a little bit more about AI and then any progress updates that we get on either Dojo and or the 4680 batteries or just battery growth in general. We just saw the announcements by Panasonic that they're going to be building a couple new factories. And so, kind of listening for any mention of those types of things. And really, yeah, just any hint that we might get on some of the big core technology pieces moving forward. I know that that's not necessarily the focus of the earnings calls typically, but it is one of those places where I try and really listen for those things because sometimes Elon does give us some really important tidbits on those earnings calls.
Okay, what about you, Matt?
Yeah, honestly, it's one of the earnings calls I'm not looking as forward to as maybe I have for some of the ones in the past. And maybe we can get into this with my own kind of estimates for the quarter. But it's the first time I've been doing earnings estimates since Q4 of 2019. This is the first time I'm actually lower than Wall Street in what I think Tesla's going to do. So, I think it's going to be just another quarter where the continued price cuts are kind of showing the cost in terms of margin. So I think there's going to be a slight disappointment. Of course, I hope I'm wrong, and even if I'm right, there's always interesting tidbits and stuff from Elon. So I'm certainly looking forward to it in that regard. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be a chock full of good news that investors are going to love.
Yeah, and I think it's already built in. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that if the margins are compressed and lower than the estimates, the earnings per share, that's okay. I think we're going to be fine. I mean, the stock always falls, right? I think that there was a stat that says every earnings call for the last 3 earnings call, the stock fell by 9%, 9.3, 9.7, like that for the last 3. So the stock's going to fall. But actually, what if there was an upside? There's a potential for an upside, right? What if they shock and show that there is actually cost of goods reduction and it started to show up this quarter? Unlikely. I'm not saying that it's going to, but you know what I mean? Like it could be on the upside.
Yeah, the stock has taken a pretty big beating coming into this earnings report. I mean, I think it was right heading into the Q2 report, the stock was around 290, I want to say. And so, I mean, we've basically been, down for 6 months straight after that. A little bit of zigzagging, of course, but yeah, I mean, when the stock has had periods of weakness like that, then there is a better setup for a beat to be potentially impactful. So I don't have too strong of an opinion either way about what might happen. Where I focus more of my attention is just like in the long term. This is all going to be noise. Whether we drop down to 150, whether we go up to 250, it's like it doesn't really matter. What really matters is are they continuing to lay the foundation for Tesla to be this kind of real world AI company that Elon talks about. So when FSD and energy, which is less on the AI side, but I think that's a very real business as well, and then the Tesla bots start actually making real progress, eventually those will show up in the quarterly reports a couple of years from now. And when that happens, it's going to be very happy days for investors in my mind.
Well, do you guys think that that they're actually going to talk about these kinds of future, robotics AI, because it's an earnings call, and this time around, what's different is that Elon actually said that he's going to do a state of the nation kind of presentation, just like he did with SpaceX. So it sounds like that after this earnings call tomorrow, Wednesday, I think people are thinking that probably around Monday or Tuesday next week, he would do this, here's what happened in 2023. Here's what we're looking for 2024. He's not done that before. So is that possible that maybe this will be just a very dry, here's the facts, here's the numbers call, reserve any conversations about the questions, or, hey, there's the questions. And so we're going to go through that, the top 6 questions. How do you think this is going to play out? Yeah,
I
Hans, you,
yeah, I was
Matt,
gonna
I'll
let
let
Hans
you
take
start.
it, but all right, sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I do kind of think that's the way it's going to go. I mean, if you so he announced this kind of state of the nation thing at the same time that he announced the similar one that he did for SpaceX. The SpaceX kind of update he gave was, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago, something like that. And if you listen to that, there was no like kind of like earth shattering news that came out of there. It was more just a, hey, here's our strategy, here's what we've done. Like, let's be kind of
yeah.
proud of this journey that we've gone on. But like, it almost seemed unnecessary, which sounds strange to say because I always love hearing, those sorts of updates. And anytime Elon's talking, I'm listening. But there wasn't really a whole lot that was new or unknown about that. It almost seemed more like a thank you to the team for all of your hard work, and let's take a minute to appreciate how far we've come. So if he's trying to do the same thing with Tesla, then I don't think it would necessarily be like a major catalyst. Now, I think there is some more stuff that's kind of on the horizon that he could talk about in more detail. I think 4680 ramp, as Hans was alluding to, that's kind of ripe for some updates. I think we're not quite ready for Gen 3 release, but like that's going to be coming, I would say maybe a little more than 12 months or so we get that released, but like that's coming before too long. But either way, I think that's an event I'm maybe more looking forward to than the Q3 call, because we're not going to get a lot of those technical updates, or sorry, Q4 on the earnings call. I think what we'll get is more just the, kind of dry, here's what we did. And margins did this. And Elon will probably go on some, rant or some little thing that is interesting and entertaining, but that makes people feel uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I think this is the first time in a while. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of substance coming out of this call.
I think you're wrong, man.
All right, I take it. You know what? I would be so happy to be wrong.
Every single time there's been an earnings call, there's always something of substance, because what Tesla does is they do answer retail questions. They go through the top 10, and so they're going to go and talk. Now, Elon does repeat himself a lot, so that is clear. But he's going to position Tesla very strongly as a robotics AI company. I don't think we're going to hear gloomy Elon, because it's one thing when he says it and he goes, I got to prepare, or I got to PTSD. But then when you look at the actual actions of the company, they're hiring like crazy for Dojo, for the bot, for Giga Mexico. They just actually have a lawyer hired for HR at Giga Mexico. So they're now starting to hire employees there. They're building out all these factories. And you've just watched their actions and continue to move forward here. So I don't think we're going to see gloomy Elon. I hope we don't. But when he answers these questions, that's always when you get these tidbits. So, and what you just said earlier actually makes sense, which is when he does the State of the Nation thing, it's going to be much more of reflecting on the past and maybe setting up I don't think he's quite ready to do a master plan, but just a rosy future. And in fact, the answers to the questions we actually want is going to be answered at the earnings call, not at that. So you just changed my mind that could be the case. What do you think, Hans?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wonder is if the State of the Union address really is a setup for Elon not necessarily to need to be on the earnings call, and that the things that he really wants to talk about, that he can talk about at the State of the Union address, and then we'll get really the rest of the executive team on the Q4 earnings call. I don't know that that's super likely, but it definitely probably something we'll see move more and more in that direction in the future. And yeah, I do think, a lot of the questions from Say this time are related to 4680s and next gen. And it's going to be interesting to see how much they will and will not share with us on those, since they've been very direct. And I think that really boils down to whether Elon is or is not there. If he's there, I think we get a little bit more commentary. And if he's not there, then I think it's going to be pretty tight-lipped.
All right, so let's have you, Matt, come in, because you are from Rebellionaire. You are a financial analyst. Well, actually, I don't know what you call yourself.
Finance nerd is the technical term.
You're the finance nerd. You do a lot of calculations. You do a lot of deep dive on Tesla, of course, and energy. Now you're part of Rebellionaire. So what is your estimate for the Q4, what are they going to say for their guidance for Q4 deliveries? Is it going to be 2.2, 2.4 million? Or some people are saying
For
they might just be very
2024,
conservative.
I assume you're saying not Q4.
Yeah. Well, let me start it off this way. Everybody I talk to asking about what's the most important thing about the call tomorrow, Q4 earnings call, and they'll all say it's all about the guidance. It doesn't matter what the actual numbers are. What matters is what they guide. And so, first, do you agree with that statement? And two, do you think they're going to guide for 2 million for 2024 deliveries, or 2.2 or 2.4 or whatever number you might have?
So I don't necessarily think that the delivery guide is the most important thing. And to give you an idea of why I don't think that, it's that they delivered, what was it, 40,000 more vehicles in Q4 than in Q3. So somewhere in that neighborhood. But I'm actually showing a EPS decrease in my model. So and we're gonna be posting on Rebellionaire later today a kind of deep dive going through my model. All the different assumptions that goes into it. But essentially, what I'm looking at is just with the continued slog of price cuts that we've seen. We saw more of them, especially on S and X, but also on 3 and Y in the US in Q4. Like you're just continuing to chip away at your margins. So if you deliver twice as many vehicles, but you cut your margins in half, well, your earnings are unaffected. So deliveries obviously matter, and certainly for the mission, which I do really care about, they matter. But I think from like what are analysts going to care about? I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, just because there hasn't been the stability in the margins as the volumes have risen over the last 18 months or so. So I think they probably are going to guide for, I would say, something in like the 2.1, 2.2 million unit range, something like that. I mean, I think, I forget who it was, but one of their executives, maybe it was Martin, was talking about how they really are kind of caught in between these two waves. You know, they're kind of on the back end of the ramp of 3 and Y. I mean, I think those are about at the point where they're, they've saturated the market that they're going to saturate globally. Maybe we get a little bit more juice out of those, but I don't think we're going to see volumes increase on those by 50% year over year, for example. And at the same time, we don't quite have the Gen 3 platform yet. So I think the 50%, Elon's always talked about that as being the long-term goal through 2030. But 2024 to me just seems like it's set up to be one of the lower year-over-year growth in terms of deliveries, just because you don't really have a big new product. Cybertruck, Elon talks about ramping that to 250,000 eventually, certainly not this year. So I just don't see how they can really get to a really meaningful pickup in volumes to get to like 50% increase year over year.
Okay, that's a very good comment. So it's not necessarily in your mind, not the guidance for deliveries. It's actually going to be a signal whether or not gross margins is plateaued or not. Hans and I just finished a show that we'll publish in a couple of days here, where Michael Dunn of Dunn Insights is actually predicting that Tesla's going to do another price cut, a price war. So would that freak you out, Matt, if you get the sense from this call that they might even do more price cuts? Because then your margins will go down, your earnings per share will go down. Are you going to freak out?
Certainly, I won't freak out.
I
almost feel like a year ago I was probably freaking out about it. At this point, I'm just like, maybe I'm like that jaded old man who's like, I've been through this before. Like I disagree with the strategy of the price cuts, and I've been one of the people calling for some level of price cuts is fine, but price cuts as the only tool in your tool chest is the one that I just don't understand the rationale for that. What was it, 2 years ago? They included a line in their in one of their reports about how their order rate increased substantially after their competitors advertised in the Super Bowl. So once you actually get to the point where you have a demand issue instead of a supply issue, why not try that? Try that approach with a little bit more rigor or verve than maybe we've seen so far. So Elon very clearly doesn't share that same view. They've dabbled a little bit here and there, but by no means would I say there's like a concerted or aggressive effort on Tesla's behalf to really push advertising. So what they're doing is cutting prices, and that seems to be reasonably successful in pushing volumes, but at the cost of margins. And in the short term, that obviously creates some pressure, because in order for you to have a good investment when your margins just keep getting hammered. You really need something on the back end to stop that kind of bleeding that they've been doing. Now, like, I happen to really believe in autonomy and the Tesla bot and energy. So I think those things are going to come eventually, but a lot of people, for obvious reasons, don't believe in that. So you could be in the situation of a very high volatility year if that's the playbook that they go down. And Elon is just of this mindset, which he said before, like, we shouldn't be surprised, because Elon was basically saying we could sell these cars at zero margin and we'll just make it all up on the back end when we solve autonomy. And like, that's a high risk, high reward strategy, but it's not without its logic. So
let me ask you a quick question then, Matt. So the Model 3 really looks like the vehicle that we need to get figured out the most this year. The Model Y is in a pretty good position with its pricing and the fact that it's eligible for the IRA. The Model 3 is really priced pretty closely to the Model Y, so there's not a whole lot of differentiation. And then it doesn't have the IRA, and so that gets kind of messy. We did just have the Highland update. Do you expect the Model 3 to actually become re-eligible for the IRA this year? And if not, then do you expect, or I guess, what would you look out for as far as pricing on the Model 3 in order for us to continue to, maintain the same volume of Model 3 sales that we had last year?
I am kind of curious if they start pushing leases a little bit more than they have, because the Model 3 that's leased does get the benefit of the $7,500 IRA kind of applied evenly over the 3-year term of a lease. So you can get like a ridiculous deal. I think it starts at $329 a month for a Model 3 lease, which is like, that's bananas. But still, if you look at the actual number of the vehicles that are being leased, it's still single digits, very, very small. So I'm honestly just surprised that the IRA credit doesn't seem to have done very much to boost demand. And when you have the IRA credit coupled with the price cuts, it also doesn't seem to have done as much as I would have expected to increase demand. So I don't know what the answer is here. I would maybe think that they would push leases a little bit more. I mean, that also, if you really believe in autonomy, then pushing leases makes a lot of sense to Elon's point, because then Tesla's going to end up owning these vehicles at the end of the lease. So if autonomy is solved in 3 years, then you've got a bunch of company-owned robo-taxis, which would be great for the share price, obviously. So I would kind of hope they do some stuff like that to kind of push some options that are more affordable, but I don't know what the answer is. I guess is the short way of saying it.
Sounds like you did. That was it. That is the answer. That's a win-win-win scenario. In fact, last week they did already start increasing leasing for the Model Ys, I think. That sounds like the answer.
Yeah, well, but again, that's US only, and we're seeing the Giga Berlin's being shut down because of parts shortage with this whole Red Sea situation. So that'll have an impact in Q1. So the IRA is only US, and so if we're talking only Model 3 in US, like trying to increase those volumes, that'll help. But it's not the sort of thing that's gonna be a massive driver of volumes potentially. Now, that still is a good strategy, but I don't know. I just, aside from them putting it on their website, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of knowledge out there of just how cheap these vehicles are. If you don't mind, Herbert, I'll take a quick tangent. So I've got a good friend of mine, loves EVs, wanted to have an EV eventually. I've driven around on my Model Y a couple times. He loved it, loved the autonomy. They loved everything about it. And was like, oh man, I'm definitely going to get a Tesla one of these days. They're just too expensive. This was maybe 6 months ago. I'm like, all right, I kind of get that. I found out just this past weekend, he bought a Mini Cooper. And I was like,
okay.
I bet if you did the math of what you paid for that compared to what you could have got a Model 3 for, I bet he just had no idea.
Had no idea.
So it's just I still think there's such an awareness issue, even of people who have driven these. Maybe he wouldn't have bought it, but maybe he would have leased it, and that would have been a very good option for him. So it's just interesting to hear somebody who bought a Mini Cooper saying they really want a Tesla and eventually they are going to get one. But for now they just needed a new car right away, so they bought a Mini Cooper instead.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you. Everybody agrees with you. Education, advertising, they should be doing it. Yes.
All right, I'll shut
There's
up.
no. I just we've had this conversation so many times. It's a truth. Like they need to do this. Absolutely true. Okay, back to the Q4 event tomorrow. Let's go through what the consensus was, and then let's share some information and continue the conversation. So this just dropped a few minutes ago. Martin Vieca, who's the investor relations for Tesla, shared this. He does this every time there's a quarter. And what they do is they go and talk to all these sell side analysts and they give a consensus. So the kinds of analysts that they talk to are people like Bernstein, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, of course, Morgan Stanley, Adam Jonas from that. Mizuho, so actually the guy there, he's actually the #1 rated investment analyst right now, #1. And he is a major bull for Tesla. So you can see these are the guys. So from based on what they said, this is so busy and I know it's blurry, sorry guys, but basically, yeah, if we go down here, I think, what were you saying, Matt? This is probably the most important thing right here. So on average, for Q4 2023, the earnings per share non-GAAP that all of these 28 analysts are saying on average is 0.73, so 73 cents. What you're thinking? Yeah, now you are even 65 cents, dude. Why are you so much lower than? Not these guys are not never accurate. I'm just asking how you came up with your number.
They're always lower than the estimate though, so it is actually kind of unusual that they're higher than I am. So I mean, when I was going through the exercise, I'm looking at the very significant, like around 15% price cuts, at least in the US, that we saw in Model S and X, basically right at the beginning of Q4. So that creates some gross margin pressure. You also had the price cuts in the US on 3 and Y around $2,000. Depends on the trim, obviously. Offsetting that were some price increases, very modest ones, but still price increases in China. But essentially, when I'm putting all the math together and coming up with an estimate, I kind of thought the math would show up at like 73 cents or something in that neighborhood. That's just kind of ballpark what I was thinking my model would spit out. But I try to be neutral about this and just give my best estimate, and I'm coming up with 65. So I'm wondering if maybe they weren't looking at the price cuts in as much detail, or I'm not sure exactly how they come up with their models. Obviously, every analyst does it a little differently, but that was where it was shaken out for me.
So let's have a few scenarios. Okay, let's say that you're correct, and they announced that the earnings per share is 65 cents instead of 73. What's going to happen near term for the stock? Crash? Built in?
I don't think so. I mean, so I wouldn't say it's built in, because if it was built in, then the analyst would say 65 cents. But if you look at similar beats, I forget what it was, but maybe it was Q2, maybe it was Q3.
Yeah.
So I think it was Q2. They beat by like 8 cents or something.
Right here.
Like, no, that's the. So there was like a pretty sizable beat, and the stock sold off after that. Now maybe it had run up too high going into that, but my point is, a lot of times in the stock market, good news is bad news. There's sell the news. Right. There's like, you can have actual bad news and the stock goes up sometimes. So like, I'm not going to claim any sort of knowledge on what happens in the short term, but I would expect a bit of volatility, just because the stock's been so volatile on the way down. If it's a bad beat, that could add fuel to the fire and we can keep going down. I know a lot of people who look at technical analysts now, that's like the charts people. I don't do a lot of that myself, but a lot of them are saying that, we're close to the resistance levels. So, could be a good rally coming off of this. I don't put a whole lot of weight in there, but either way, I can see pretty drastic movements either direction, which is a good way of saying nothing at all.
I don't know. Hans, what's your thinking?
Yeah, I can't probably add anything there. That was pretty much what I would say, that, I have no idea how the stock market will respond to that. And that's not really, I just, as a retail investor, I'm not managing anybody's money. I don't have to understand how those things are going to move, and my time horizons are, 5-10 years. So those are not the thing. That's what most people are going to come to the Q4 call for, is like, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? And they're all going to, pull out their Ouija boards and make their bets. And what I'm looking for is more, okay, what did we learn today that tells me what 3 years or 5 years or 10 years look like? So, yeah, it's always interesting to watch all of the comments that people make and the various expectations that people have and how much they read into it. And fortunately, I can just kind of sit back with a bowl of popcorn and see how it goes.
Sorry, I was laughing because Farzad made a comment. Could you read that, Matt?
Yeah, so Farzad says, I'd give a like to this video, but Matt's awful face is keeping me from doing it. Please delete this. So yeah, thanks for the love, Farzad, as always.
I'm gonna put him in timeout. Should I put him on timeout? I can the user timeout, doesn't I?
Oh no, it's just more attention will just encourage him. Just gotta ignore him.
Okay, so all right, let's go through the questions. I know that you just did this a few days ago, but it's quite interesting, obviously, because this is how retail investors are thinking. So far, 6 voted for questions. So what happens is Tesla earnings calls, every time they do this, they always allow the retailers to come up with questions, and the top 10 usually that are voted highly, they will answer it. And they've done a good job, trying to address the questions that Tesla investors, the retail investors have. So far, 6,400 Tesla investors have voted and combined $1.8 billion worth of shares. And it's actually the shares, the total accumulated shares per question, that determines which is the first question, second question, and so forth. So if you haven't yet already, Tesla has a platform called this Say. Go find out how to get into that and then ask your question or vote and ask, add these questions. So this is the number one question so far, 4.6 million Tesla shares represented. Given that you moved the start of the next gen compact vehicle production to Austin, has a timeline improved so that we might see next gen platforms in 2025? Love it. Next gen is probably one of the bigger movers next to the bot in my mind. So I'm kind of disappointed this wasn't a bot question, but certainly next gen is much more real in terms of people's minds. Good question. What do you guys think?
Hans, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that we should get some color on. I'm afraid that we're going to get the answer that we're not going to comment on material things to the stock that are going to happen in the future, even though it is an earnings call. But this is definitely something that we all really want to know the answer to, is what's the timeline? Are we looking at, trying to make first deliveries by the end of this year? Are you looking at 2025? We know that based on the initial timeline that they were looking at trying to get Mexico completed and have vehicles rolling off the line there, that should be vehicles inside of this year. Now, I don't know that, in reality that we're going to be able to see that, but I would think that having things in Austin actually accelerates the timeline to first vehicles. But then the question is that, the demand for the next generation vehicles is going to be so high that they may not even begin to deliver vehicles if they only have basically the proof of concept line up and running. They may just start kind of stockpiling and then go ahead and begin installing lines in Mexico and then wait to actually begin delivering until they have lines in multiple places or multiple lines, whatever it looks like, for them to actually be able to make a much bigger dent in the demand that they'll have once deliveries begin to occur for the next gen vehicle.
I'll make you a bet, Hans, and you, Matt. My bet is that you're right. They're not gonna say the timeline, but they can't. Elon and the team won't be able to help themselves talking about this. He's talked about how it's much accelerated faster than it's much in accelerated form than it's expected. It's going to blow your mind. This next gen kind of production line that we're doing. I think they're going to talk that kind of stuff and they're going to hype it up. And because it is a really big revolution, this unbox model, and they're gonna just keep talking about it. So they may not give the timeline, but they will give comments about the production process that they're taking.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only thing I'd add is, I think there's a very rational reason for them not to share any details on timeline, and that's you don't want to cannibalize sales from Model 3 or to a lesser extent Model Y.
There is no cannibalization. Come on. There's no cannibalization. Do you think so? Honestly, you're part of Gary Black. You think that there's a cannibalization?
Model 3 for sure. Like if you can like buy a Model 3 for 35,000 and it's like a stretch investment for you and you really want it, but you're just not quite sure. And then Elon's like, oh yeah, like the new Gen 3 platform is going to be a $25,000 car, but it's going to be eligible for the $7,500 tax credit, and it's going to launch in say early 2025 or something like that. That's like that buyer now has that piece of information to say, oh, okay, actually, it's the smart thing for me to do is just to wait it out, 12 months. I'll hold on to my beater until then and just buy. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily how big of an impact that's going to be, but I think for sure, like there will be some percentage of your car buying population who will choose not to buy a Model 3 because of that issue.
It's a utilitarian car. It's going to be very bare. It is not going to have any crossover with Model 3.
Zero.
So, I guess
zero.
One of my questions.
This Venn diagram is completely separate. Like there's not even a little.
Like this. Touching, but not.
All right. I will
not
say
crossover.
A little more than that.
I also think the launch pricing is going to be much higher than $25,000, just like the launch pricing of the Model 3 was much higher than $35,000, and the launch pricing of Cybertruck is much higher than $50,000. Like, those are aspirational prices, and we'll get there. But to begin with, the probably price gap between a Model 3 and the first, few tens of thousands of next gen vehicles, they're going to be very close, and the next gen vehicle is going to be much smaller, much less utility, so you're going to get a lot more car for not that much more money on the Model 3 when deliveries begin in the United States, I would expect.
Yeah, it's a weird situation though. I mean, assuming that the model or the Gen 3 would get like the tax credit, for example, you could have like whatever the top of the line Gen 3 is. I mean, that even seems like a weird thing, like the Gen 3 performance. I don't know, like what would that cost? 30,000 or something like that, 35. And then if that gets the credit and the Model 3 doesn't, then it's like, why would anyone at that point get like, a base Model 3 as opposed to the Gen 3 performance? It's just, I don't know. It seems like there's going to be some impact there. But I think you're right, Hans. It's not going to start at 25. And for the record, Elon hasn't said 25 in a long time. I think we're all kind of extrapolating on that.
Yeah. I think I might have said utilitarian, and it's utilitarian. Thank you, TV. Utilitarian is military, right? Mistake there. Okay, that was a good first question. Glad that it was on next gen compact car. They're not going to give you a timeline. Yes, and I agree. There could be cannibalization. You should never test the cannibalization issue. That is a dangerous game you're playing. So I agree with you. When will Tesla start construction on Giga Nevada expansion and Giga Mexico? And when can we expect each of these to produce their first products? I don't know why I made up the second. I wouldn't ask that for my second question.
I'm wondering if this was asked before the news of the groundbreaking last week happened, because the Giga Nevada expansion has already begun.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's still an interesting question. I wouldn't mind, getting some more clarity on this, but yeah, I think we at least have the answer of when the expansion is going to start. But what I'd be more interested in is like, when are you actually going to be producing 4680s in Giga Nevada and in the Shanghai mega factory too? I'm very curious about that in addition to Giga Mexico.
Yeah. And then, like I said earlier, in Giga Mexico, they actually hired a lawyer for HR employment law. So that's a good sign that they're about to start to hiring employees. That's what it looks like. Next question here is, should retail retail shareholders, should they be concerned about Elon and his statement about the 25% voting rights that he needs? Absolutely. If not, why is this not the top question? Maybe it's just early and people need to still kind of re-rank this. But what do you guys think? That's he needs to clarify this a little bit more than he has already.
I mean, I guess he can, and I would welcome that, but I feel like we've got perfect clarity on that. He said the board is great. That means that there's no disagreement, there's no conflict between him and the board. They agree that this is what needs to happen, and they just are all under a lot of personal liability for his compensation plan, and so they need to get clarity from the United States government on ways to not find themselves in hot water before they go ahead and approve something that does get Elon to that 25% voting share once he has met all of his performance deliverables. So that's what's going to happen. And it's just a matter of getting the details hammered out and getting the timeline figured out. And then a matter of performance on Tesla's part to actually achieve whatever milestones that they set. But no, I mean, he's already making all the aggressive moves. If he was not comfortable moving forward with these things at Tesla, we wouldn't see the Dojo project that we have. We wouldn't see them just kicking it or knocking it out of the park with Optimus development. All these things show, from an action standpoint, that he is all in on AI and robotics at Tesla. And so this is just kind of a detail that needs to be worked out that has not been completed. But I think that Elon has given us all that we need to, all the confidence that we need to have as retail investors that this is what's going to happen, and it's just a matter of time.
I just think that this question kind of like tees up Elon to say something crazy, or like give him the kind of ammunition that people just don't like. I think back a couple of years ago, he said something like, "If you don't like volatility, don't own the stock." Something to that effect. And like, I just think that there's not much good that can come out of this question, and there's a lot of potential for Elon to start shooting from the hip and saying things that people are not going to like. So I mean, even the way that it starts, it's like, should we be concerned? And like, I just feel like Elon's going to latch onto that and be like, well, if you're concerned, sell the stock. Or yeah, should we be concerned? Like, I'm not here to comfort you. Like, I'm just focused on building great products. And if I'm going to do that, like, here's what I need. And if you don't like it, then get out. And if you do, then it might be volatile, but I'm going to like work hard to reward you in the long run. I just, that to me is like, there's a very high probability that that's the route that this question goes down. And if that happens,
hey,
like,
if it gets people like
Walk
Share to sell the stock and stop complaining on X, I'm all for it.
He thrives on the drama, though. That's not happening.
Yeah. So I agree with you guys that he probably should not talk about the 20% of voting share, but he did bring it out to the public, and he went that way. So, maybe there needs to be reassurance from the board, and just restating the board and him are not, they're waiting for the lawsuit to settle before they can do it. But this part here, which is, he needs to make a very clear statement that Tesla is now a robotics AI company. If you look at what he's been saying in the last couple months, he's been repeating the words robotic AI for Tesla. And he is going to need to really force this, be much more clear what projects he's working on, how confident he is that this is heading in this direction. So I hope that that's the case. All right, let's look at the next question here. So how many Cybertruck orders are in the queue, and when do you anticipate you'll be able to fulfill all existing orders?
Yeah, I'll go. I don't really like this question either. I mean, there's first of all, you have no idea how many of those pre-orders will convert to actual orders and deliveries. So many people ordered, dozens or hundreds of them, even in the hopes of operating a robotaxi fleet. And there's no way that you can really know how many of them will convert. So I think for the meantime, like, this is clearly just going to be a supply ramp issue. And when they get to the point where they've exhausted all those orders, honestly, I don't think anybody, even with perfect knowledge, could answer that question, because you just don't know. I mean, I have 21 on order, and I don't know if I'll accept 1 or 21 or like none of them. I honestly don't know. So like, Elon couldn't even answer this question, I don't think, if he wanted to. So I think the real answer is they just have to ramp up as quickly as possible. And if he could share something on, the new order demand has been strong, like, that'd be some good information. I think that the best we could hope for here is, he had stated previously a goal of around 250,000 units annually. If he says something to the effect of, we're seeing such strong demand that we think it might be higher than that, and give some number, that'd be really good news. But I don't think you can actually answer this question as worded.
Yeah, honestly, I miss the days that Rob Maurer used to basically tell people which questions to vote for on the Tesla
Really?
Daily podcast, and they kind of
Yeah.
put the kibosh on that, because we definitely got much higher quality questions. When people don't have some guidance, they go in here and ask all kinds of stuff that the people that understand Elon and how he's going to answer questions are going to be like, yeah, that's not going to get you the answer that you're looking for. And so, yeah, I kind of miss those days. I would say that just my read on the actual answer to that question is that Cybertruck at terminal volume is going to sell between 500,000 and 1 million units a year. It's going to take us until 2027, maybe 2028, to reach those types of volumes. And right now, I know that there's really over 2 million orders in the backlog, but it'll probably take us, a couple years just to make the first 2 million deliveries. So that's really where we're at.
Okay, that was the Cybertruck question. Next one is the energy question. So we know that Matt is the energy king here. He has tremendous research and knowledge about energy. I think even your background, right, Matt? You used to work for an energy utility company. Now you do financial analysis. So this question is, can we get Tesla energy volumes reported in the P&D that they do every quarter? Obviously, we all want that to happen. They didn't they say that they were going to start happening? They thought in the third quarter or fourth quarter of last year. Of course, it didn't happen yet. Again, I don't know why this was asked as part of the top 6, but still, it's a good question.
Well, I don't know that it is actually. And the reason is there is such a lag between when the revenues are recognized for a project, and when the actual deployments of a megapack are like reported in the quarterly letter. So if you just do the simple math, for example, of like stripping out solar revenues, and so you can isolate energy revenues, and then you divide that by the number of deployments, you get a number of about $350 per kilowatt hour, which is significantly lower than like the cheapest megapack or the cheapest anything that Tesla offers. So what that tells you is that there's a pretty significant mismatch between the actual deployments of stationary storage that are reported and the revenue associated with those. So like if you were just to take the deployments number that we get in the quarterly letter and put that in the production and delivery report, that might not necessarily give you better information on estimating revenues, just because there are so many of these projects are very long lead time, and you're recognizing just a portion of the revenues in any given quarter because there's different milestones that need to get picked up in order to recognize the revenue. So like, I think as much as I'd like more information on the energy side, what I think would be more helpful than just putting, the total gigawatt hours, let's say, in the P&D report, is let's just have better reporting in general on Tesla energy. Let's like actually break it out as its own segment, where you've got, revenues of solar, revenues of battery, like actual deferred revenue. And they do a little bit of that. Like if you're reading the footnotes, you can kind of connect some of these dots, but it's very arduous, and it's imperfect because some of it is just lumped in with other pieces. So if they were to actually break out energy as its own segment and do like a full income statement, balance sheet on that, I think that would be more useful than just taking the deployments and sticking that in the P&D report.
Okay, love it. I mean, so you're correct. Like I love everything you just said. What was going to my head was it's symbolic. So if they start doing this, then it repositions Tesla as not just an auto company; they're an energy company. And here's tell me another car company that does this. But if they do what you're suggesting, which is a new balance sheet and so forth, will that also work in that manner of just symbolically showing that we're an energy company also, meaning to say that the energy is already now past 10%. What's the magic number when this is no longer just a small little, startup thing? It's now a real deal that's truly impacting revenue, truly impacting margins and earnings and all that.
Yeah, I mean, just in my model, I've got energy margins at like 14% of the auto margins. So it's already, in my mind, getting to this point where it's big enough where it probably warrants it. And we all know that energy is growing much faster than auto at this point. So, that 14%, before we know it's going to be 20, going to be 25%. And I think when you get to that point, it's very obvious that you need, a breakout in more detail than we're getting right now. So this might be the time to have some symbolic change like that. Who knows? They might even surprise us and give us that breakout in Q4. But to me, it's a matter of time. And I like what you said, Herbert. I do think that'd be a nice kind of symbolic gesture that, hey, this is growing, this is serious, and we're going to start giving you and our investors, access to more information because it is so serious.
Okay, so
Then I have a question for Matt real quick before we move on from there. Do you quantify and then track over time your expectations for how much deferred revenue is sitting out there for energy currently? I think that would be something to be real valuable to have.
Yeah, so Tesla does give a lot of the information on like the deferred revenue side of it. But then I forget exactly how they classify it. There's another piece of it. So there's like unearned performance-based obligations or something like that, in addition to the deferred revenue. And so that's like, for example, Tesla guarantees the output of a megapack, at 3.9 megawatt hours, for example. Let's say you've delivered that, but you haven't done the acceptance testing yet. So you actually have what's called a liquidated damage, where if let's say you do the test and it shows only 3.8 gigawatt hour or megawatt hours of capacity. Well, then Tesla's on the hook to pay you some cash because your battery didn't perform as you guaranteed that it would. Once they meet that milestone and say, okay, it actually passed the test, then you can recognize that incremental revenue. But that's different. That's a performance obligation that hasn't been met yet, which is different than the deferred revenue, which is just, kind of the normal milestone-based payment. And even I, who's like an energy nerd and is familiar with the accounting of these projects and is like scraping the footnotes, it's very hard for me even to like keep track of all this. And we just have imperfect information because you don't know what the milestones are. And so every project has different ones, and you don't know which project's in which phase and how much is going to be recognized now. So I'm tracking it about as well as you possibly can with the information provided, but I think we would need more guidance from Tesla to really give us some better inclination. I mean, if they actually just gave management guidance of, we expect to do 1.8 million vehicles this year, something to that effect of, we expect to deploy, I don't know, 30 gigawatt hours this year in stationary storage. And while this is subject to some uncertainty, we expect to recognize, I don't know, $5 to $7 billion of revenue. Like that type of information would be really helpful also.
Guidance. Okay, so the sixth question is on the 4680 batteries, which is a fantastic question. Could have been even the top question, but I just have to, before we even get here, why is there no bot questions? Do you guys agree with that there's no bot questions? Is that still very much a startup thing and not something to be talking about yet in an earnings call?
I mean, I think it's the most exciting thing to track at Tesla right now, but I guess maybe that shows that not only is bot, the story of bot way too early for mainstream media. I mean, I would think that almost all retail shareholders at this point in time would be very interested to track that, but based on the votes of these questions, it doesn't even seem like it's really on the radar for the most part with retail shareholders. So I guess that does give us some sort of an indication on just how early we are in that narrative overall.
Yeah, here's my issue with all this, okay? AI boom has happened. The AI boom kicked off last year and accelerated in 2023 and expanded beyond the Mag 7. Now it's impacting Fortune 500 companies. They're all rising. And who is the AI player, who's not? Tesla is going to lose a lot of their AI engineers if they don't make it clear to the company and to the world that Tesla is an AI leader. And so you've seen Elon talk about robotics AI. We are a robotics AI company. He needs to solidify that. If it's not going to be done at the earnings call, he needs to do that at the State of the Nation Union call that he does a week later. Um, and he has to talk about bot, and he has to. They've been dropping demos each month, and they have to, can't let this out. Their leadership in this space, and even if it's just again marketing, just in everybody's minds, we have the largest supercomputer in the world. It's going to be 10 times larger than anything it's ever done. We have the best AI team. We're working on real world vision based AI, not only FSD but also robots. This is who this company is. Auto and energy are sidelines, not sidelines, but you know what I mean? Like they're kind of like they're funding this big effort, but this is who we are. So I worry that if he doesn't talk bot and he doesn't talk AI, this would be a lost call. I guess I got to be careful with my words. I wouldn't say totally lost, but you know what I mean? Like a lost opportunity, I suppose.
You're going to be more depressed than Elon on this call.
Depressed, no, Herbert, gloomy Herbert.
That'll have to be the next impression I work on. No, Herbert, I agree with you. I think the tricky thing is it's tough to give details like this on an earnings call, as you said. But I think something that would make sense to do during this call is to say something to the effect of, we hope to put bots in one of our factories this year doing real work and kind of offsetting actual human labor cost. Like, to me, that's like the very like the smallest little crack that you could be opening the door to make it click for these analysts that are just like, all I can do is put in my Excel sheet what our margin's going to be, and like I can't do bot because it's too complicated and it's a what if. But if you can kind of frame the bot opportunity as a way to reduce costs in your manufacturing footprint, as soon as whatever's a reasonable time frame, to me that might help to really change analysts' minds on this sort of thing. I mean, we had the Figure AI announcement that they're going to be putting their bots in the BMW factory, so it shouldn't be a very big logical leap for these analysts to say, oh, Tesla could do that in their own factories. Obviously it's going to be the lowest hanging fruit, but whatever. If you can actually just I think it's a mental barrier more than anything that you can say, oh, I can at least start putting bot in as like a cost reduction. And it'll be small to start with for sure. But I think that's something that people can at least get their heads around. So I'd love to hear them say something like that.
Wanted to. So, okay. So the last question of the top 6 anyways, what has been a barrier to ramping 4680 cells into the multi-million cells per week rate? When do you expect to get there? So very good question. We need to have more questions on 4680 cells. What's your opinions?
Yeah, I like this question too. We had that update. I forget which month it was when they hit the 2 millionth cell a while ago. So you can kind of extrapolate from that time frame. But I think that this is actually a good question that we could reasonably get an answer to on the earnings call. And so to the extent they do and kind of lay out what that roadmap for kind of future ramping would look like, I'd love to hear some of those details. The other thing which is related to that is they kind of hinted that they're retooling Cato Road right now for the next gen 4680 line. Anything on what might be going on there, and what are the kind of technical challenges they're trying to overcome, and when do they think they might get the updates from that new pilot line rolled out to, I would assume it would be the Giga Nevada line or some other factory. I'd love to hear those sorts of details too. So I really like this question actually.
Yeah, I mean, they did in a past earnings call, they did say that we are not going to be battery constrained for 2023 or whatever year it was. So I want to hear them say the same thing. And then obviously they're not going to answer this question, but I'd love to know, are you going to be battery constrained, or where are the batteries going to be to supply the compact car? Because when that comes out, if that's launched, let's say 2025, it's not going to be like a normal car launch. It's going to have to be coming out in mass. Like it's a lot higher volumes, quicker than other cars needs to be in order to get that margin cost, instead of profitable car rather than being a cost guzzler car for them. So, you know what I mean? Like, I need to understand, I don't know if you guys have done the research here, where are the batteries coming from? Is it going to be LFP? Is there enough to launch at least the first year? And what are they going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I have been assuming for quite some time that a lot of those batteries are going to be manufactured by CATL here in the United States. It doesn't take CATL very long to throw up a new battery factory, but they did kind of have their entire supply chain already set up in China. And so that's kind of remains to be seen what all it takes to actually get all of that set up here. But the good thing is that even if they have to import a bunch of the materials to the United States from China, that if CATL can do production of the batteries here, that then those batteries are eligible for quite a bit of the IRA tax incentives. And but then also we have seen just tremendous growth in 4680 production. I think that Jordan was clocking it in at what 20 something percent month over month CAGR on the growth in 4680 production, which is just crazy. So it does seem like they've hit their stride on that growth. And we heard at the last earnings call Drew talk about the fact that they're adding a whole nother, I think, 8 lines or something in Austin. And obviously it looks like they broke ground in Nevada, and so there's probably going to be expansion on 4680 production there in Nevada as well, kind of alongside whatever the semi line is that they put up there. And so it seems like we're really hitting a knee in the S curve on 4680 production that should go a long ways. And then obviously Panasonic announced that they're going to be bringing both 2170 and 4680 form factors to the party as well. So yeah, lots of options it seems like are going to be available, but I would think that, just the scale that we're talking about for the next gen vehicle to me only makes sense with LFP packs. And I would be shocked if that's not what we see.
Hans, that's a great point. I mean, it's not only being battery constrained, but there's also the IRA credit. So if you're making 4680, even on a 50 kilowatt hour pack, which is smaller than most, you're talking about more than $2,000 of a essentially direct credit that Tesla would get. So actually ramping up 4680 is like a hugely impactful financially, hugely impactful benefit to Tesla. So I'm really hoping that we get a little bit more of that and some clarity on where, like, if they could actually say how many gigawatt hours they think they might do this year, that would actually be really helpful too.
Okay, so for the earnings call tomorrow, right? So Zach Kirkhorn is no longer the CFO. Now we have Vaibhav Taneja, and he's relatively new. Now he's worked for Tesla for a long time. He's and so forth, but it's like his relative new in terms of being a key presenter in the earnings call. Do you think that he will be the one that's taking charge of the whole call, majority of the call, or do you think that Elon will be there because he's just gonna bring him on, slowly get him on board? He was on the Q3 call, I remember, and I remember that everybody just kept interrupting him, correcting him even.
Yeah, I don't see how Elon cedes a lot of territory here. I mean, especially if it's not a particularly strong quarter, as I'm forecasting. Elon likes to try to do damage control in situations like that, kind of explain why they're in. Well, I think he tries to do damage control, but then it ends up creating his own sort of fires along the way, which can be entertaining and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, it's damage fuel on.
Yeah,
damage fuel.
So I just think there's so much going on with Tesla right now. I mean, what was it? 2 years ago, Elon said he's not going to do earnings calls anymore unless there's something serious going on, and since then he's done all but one. So he will have done more than Zach Kirkhorn since making that comment, actually, which is kind of hilarious. So yeah, I think he's going to lead the show as much as possible. Honestly, I'd love to hear from Drew Baglino on a lot of the 4680 stuff. I think that'd be a real win if we can hear his voice a bit more. Even Tom Zhu, to the extent he's on the call, I don't know if he will be, but to talk about some of the manufacturing build out would be really nice. But yeah, this new CFO, I'd love to hear his voice a little bit more because I just don't know much about him yet. So it was kind of nice to get to know Zach over all the years and hear him kind of get his own voice and be comfortable speaking up. And I think the investors really like that after some years. So hopefully we can do the same thing after a couple quarters with this new CFO.
I was super impressed on the Sandy Monroe interviews that, they gave Sandy so much time with the executive team for Cybertruck in Peter and Lars and Drew and David Lau and Franz. So like they are really, it seems like, coming to the point where they're a lot more comfortable with more people being more front and center in the conversation. So I really appreciate that and really hoping to see that increase as we go into a future earnings call. And then, we also got that one little tidbit that Ron Barron accidentally slipped out that more or
Yeah.
less we can assume that Tom Zhu is, in line to be at a very, very high position, we'll say,
I
inside
I
of
didn't
Tesla. And so it'll be fun to see if we hear anything more from him as
I
well.
did I didn't read the same way in between the lines that you did there. That's a leap. Okay, but so let's talk a little bit more about Elon and its earnings calls. So my impression is that Elon's not doing things purposely. He is just trying to be as honest as possible. And that's why he comes off as gloomy and he's not pitching the stock. And then I don't know, maybe he didn't sleep well that night too. That obviously affects things. But what's your analysis? I mean, we're not psychologists here, but why would you have a CEO talk negatively about the future of your business in the next year? Why would you do that?
I mean, I think you kind of hit it, Herbert. I mean, he wants to be kind of honest. He's always tried to, I think, give his honest take of what he thinks the company is going to do, and he's been like wrong on a lot of things. But I think last quarter, he was, just saying we're facing some real challenges. Now, in the long run, we'll be fine, but in the next year, I don't know, things are looking a little bit rough. Like, it's hard to disagree with that assessment, to be honest with you. I mean, that's kind of shaping the way that I'm thinking about it too. I think this is a bit of a development year where we need to stabilize margins and hopefully the economy doesn't really deteriorate. I don't think it will, but I think that's a legitimate risk. And so Tesla, first of all, just needs to kind of survive that, which I think there's no doubt that they will. But Elon mentioned the kind of scar tissue he built up from 2008. So I just think that he's sharing what he actually thinks, and that on the back end of that, once this passes, he'll build it up into a company that's worth more than Apple and Saudi Aramco put together. I think the three of us see how that plan actually makes sense, and think that they'll get there. Now, when is a real question, but Elon just he doesn't have anything to lose, really. It doesn't really affect him too much if the stock goes down by 30% in a week. So, for us, it can be a little bit more dramatic, but I think Elon is just so focused on the long term that he doesn't necessarily mind the volatility.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that it's, like you said, a big part of it is just trying to be truthful about what he sees. And there's an element of the fact that he just doesn't care about short-term stock movements. Like, it doesn't factor into the calculus for him at all in what he's about to say. And that's just very opposed to the way that conversation happens at the board level, at the CEO level, on Wall Street, because that's the absolute most important thing to 99.9% of those people. And Elon is just not part of the 99.9%. And we see that in both the way that he interacts with other people, but also in the results that he's able to deliver. But I think it really even goes beyond that. I think that the sentiment that he expressed this year to Bob Iger, that he feels that exact same sentiment towards people who are focused on the short term. And so I think, beyond just trying to say what he believes is true, I think he's actually purposefully antagonistic to short-term traders, and because he doesn't believe that they actually contribute anything positively to the accomplishment of the mission. He believes that they are a drag on being able to accomplish the mission. And so he says things that basically tell them almost on every earnings call, GFY.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to add a couple more points here, and this person here actually articulated what I was about to say too. Elon is honest. Yes, sometimes he's too optimistic with his time frame, but he said that without optimism, he probably wouldn't have tried starting so many companies. So the way when I listen to Elon at these calls, you have to kind of I try to do this, understand what he's focused on at that day, that moment, that hour, that month, that he just left a factory. Like, for example, I think in the last earnings call, he was deep in Cybertruck production hell. And so he comes out going, my God, this is so hard. Creating Cybertruck production is hard, and all that's easy, but production is hard. And so he's trying to explain to people what hell he's going through, and he needs to go through that hell to improve this and fix every problem to make this work. He ends up doing it, but everybody, us who will listen to this, oh my God, the company's going to die and the company's struggling, when he is struggling with that particular focus at that moment. And the same way, he comes in and tells his employees, I need you to get something done right away. His timelines are forward looking. They're usually too early, and he's much later. So he's optimistic that way. He's pessimistic in the short term, optimistic in the long term, but he needs that in order to drive the company forward. And yet when he talks in the earnings call, talking to shareholders, we interpret a certain way when he's just telling you what his day was. You have to kind of like, I kind of dig into what factory did he just leave today?
Yeah, I think that's right. He does wear his emotions on his sleeve, and I think we all probably read into it too much. But it's hard not to at the same time when he's so flippant on some of these calls, and it's just kind of strange. Like he'll go from being depressed on one call to just like over the top optimistic. What was it, April of last year? He said, I actually think we are going to solve autonomy this year. And it's like, even like the most like bullish bulls don't really believe that. Like, I'm sure you'll make great strides, and actually like the V12 architecture is a huge stride in that direction, but like you're nowhere near actually having solved it in a way that your customers would recognize that the problem's actually solved. So yeah, it is kind of interesting. It's like a tale of two different Elons of who are you going to get on from call to call. But yeah, you're right. A lot of times, Herbert, I think it's just what has he been dealing with? How frustrating is the current situation? And I think that's we should read more into that than his actual like. I should say we should refrain from extrapolating his mood on like the prospects of the company.
Yeah, let's play Elon earnings call bingo. So this is from Business Insider or Business Week. They just showed that Business Week. They just did this 2 days ago. And so these are things that Elon might say at the earnings call. I didn't like this. I thought it was kind of, I don't know. I think we could have done something much more fun.
Tesla community would do a much better version of this.
I think
while
so.
still like poking fun a little bit, but
yeah,
like some of these are just weird, like interrupts an executive.
How do you not have orders of magnitude?
Yeah.
Seriously.
So that's what I want to do. I will play this game with us three. Like what we'll listen to it, and which one of our phrase is mentioned first. If I can go first because I'm pretty sure I know what's going to be.
All right, go ahead.
Guaranteed, dude. Guaranteed. Okay. Robotics AI company. Boom. First thing comes out of their mouth.
I mean, Cybertruck's pretty low hanging fruit, so I may just take my chances on that. It seems like a reasonable one to pick. Hans, what are you thinking?
Mine is incredible Tesla team.
What? Oh, the incredible. Okay, yeah, okay. Thanking the team. Yes. Well, you're right. Of course. Every sentence.
We can really start to gamify this. Q4. That's what I think.
Right. Welcome. I beat you.
Dang.
I beat you.
Forward-looking statements.
Yeah, it's whatever the phrase is that Martin Viecha always says to get things.
All right, guys. That was dumb. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. He's an analyst nerd. He calls himself Data Geek at Rebellionaire. You guys check out that company. Now that Matt's there, it's pretty awesome. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I love Bradford. Just like I was trying to praise you, not love Bradford. Funny. Great team. Thank you so much for joining us. Hans and I do, every week we do our shows. So keep on watch on that, and we'll be joining together. Farzad's stream tomorrow, so watch that as well. And I'll have this live stream in my show, as my channel as well. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Bye bye.